We are all set. So, my name is Marcia Ellis, and I think we're all good here. I am president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Fort Lauderdale Broward branch, the NAACP. So we are here because in our community, and I'll speak specifically for Broward County, and I have heard from my counterparts in Miami-Dade County and some other counties, that there is much confusion about what's going on as far as whether we'll be able to vote, what ID we'll need, when does the new law kick in? So our job as NAACP is not to tell anyone who to vote for, but instead to make sure that the information is shared throughout. And please be advised that we are live on our YouTube page. It will be shared, the video itself will be shared out to the thousands of people that we have between all of our channels. And so, there will be no surprises there. But we want to get the information out, certainly, to those individuals who are not able to be in attendance. And with that, I want to start with opening prayer by our Religious Affairs Chair, Minister Bridget Edwards. Minister, if you would.
Good evening, Madam President, and to all assembled. Let us go to the throne of grace. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for yet another day and another opportunity for your people to gather. Father, we pray that you would be in the midst of this session on tonight. God, we pray that you would increase our understanding. Oh God, we ask you to be with each presenter, that you, oh Lord, would be in the midst of it all. And we ask it in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. With that, I want to recognize who is our certainly our sister in the struggle. She's not family. She's Senator Osgood only has one constituent, and that's me, just so I let people know everywhere I go. So I wanted to her to be on because we know all the things that she does when she's there. But she's always with us, and I call, text, all the things when she is in Tallahassee or wherever it is that she goes. But certainly when she's session, and she never declines my calls. And if she's not able to take it, she will certainly contact me back as soon as possible. So I want to open up with our senator, who is certainly our friend and our certainly our battle axe when we're on the Hill, when she's on the Hill, then we're in session. Senator.
Good evening, Madam President, to the Honorable Judge Alona Holmes and all of you. It is always good to be in company with family in the NAACP and all the amazing work that you continue to do. I'm very excited about our forum tonight. One of the challenges I have personally as an elected official is I don't have the capacity to address all the misinformation that comes across social media that oftentimes divide us, make us fearful, and just creates a lot of chaos that wears us out from taking the necessary action that we need to take. So I'm sure as our policy experts dive into it, they will tell you how this legislative session, although we didn't finish a budget, we did pass our own version of the Florida SAVE Act. And I'm sure that they will get more into that, and it will take place in January of 2027. But I am here to listen and thank all of you that are presenting tonight from the bottom of my heart. Please continue to share information, have forums, whether it's with 2 people or 2,000 people. We have to work collaboratively to get out this information. And I am a proud life member of the Fort Lauderdale Broward branch of the NAACP.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we're going to get right into it. For our political strategist, our legislative strategist, and her trying to reel all us in is interesting and is certainly a full-time job. And Pamela, we appreciate your patience with the NAACP with all 60 units and not including the youth and college division. So, and whenever YouTube never fails, and when we need something, we need your help. whether no matter what it is, you always answer the call. So we are very thank you for your continued support and work that you do with us and for us. And with that, if you will now, you have the mic, and then you will introduce your folk, and we will move through our program.
Thank you so much, Madam President. It's my honor to be here this evening. When I come, I always bring my best friends and my comrades and my ground fighters with me. But again, thank you. And I want to extend my greetings to Judge Holmes and, of course, to Senator Osgood. Everyone on this panel that's joining me this evening knows how much we rely on her inside the Senate chamber to help us navigate, to move forward, and spend a goodly amount of time opposing and fighting. But she grapples on the ground with the rest of us. So we very much appreciate that. So this evening, we're going to be talking about one of our most important subjects, how to vote. So if you aren't sure what to do when it's time to cast a vote, or even how to register to vote, if you don't know what documents you need to vote, or if you're concerned about going to vote, or you're scared to cast a vote, just know that is exactly how the Florida legislature wants you to feel. Fearful and scared. There has been a tremendous amount of change to the process of voting. I always want my audience to understand the playing field responsible for these changes. So after the 2022 election, the GOP holds a supermajority in both legislative chambers. While we've seen supermajority status in one chamber or the other, it is the first time we had seen a supermajority in both chambers simultaneously since Democrat control ended in 1992. Of the 120 seats in the House of Representatives, 85 are Republicans and 35 are Democrats. In the Senate, of the 40 seats, there are 28 Republicans, 11 Democrats, and one no party affiliate. Yes, we've had some exciting elections recently, but those two seats don't change the supermajority or the superminority status. But that's not all. Every statewide office holder in Florida is a Republican. The entire cabinet is Republican. Both U.S. senators are Republican. All 7 Supreme Court justices are Republican, with one being a moderate. And the governor, of course, is Republican. This controlling supermajority means that policy is dominated by a certain ideology. And one prevalent notion of that ideology is to focus on suppressing the vote of targeted populations. So let's look at what's happened under this current administration over the last few years. After passing Amendment 4 in 2018, the legislature has made it difficult for returning citizens to vote without creating a database to determine eligibility to vote. The legislature has passed many barriers to voting, such as eliminating ballot harvesting. A voter can only possess 2 ballots other than their own or that of a close family member. Requiring voters to request a vote by mail ballot every 2 years rather than every 4 years. It has reduced from 12 to 10 days the time to request a vote by mail ballot. They've passed laws severely impacting the services of third-party voter registration organizations in their efforts to register voters. They have required voter registration forms to be submitted in the county in which the prospective voter resides, requiring the supervisor of elections to conduct list maintenance every year and to remove voters who have not voted in the last 2 general elections, moved away, died, or committed felonies. We have lost thousands from the voter rolls. The legislature created the Office of Elections, Crimes, and Security, known as the Election Police, to hunt down and prosecute unsuspecting voters. The legislature has imposed exorbitant and extortionate fines on individuals and organizations, sometimes for merely making a simple mistake. And they made engaging a citizen ballot initiative a near impossibility. These are just some of the laws enacted in recent years impacting voters and voter registration, creating voter suppression, intimidation, and fear. Many of these laws have been characterized as a return to Jim Crow laws that existed in the 40s and 50s. Tonight, we're going to discuss some of the more recent changes and the attempts to change the way we vote by our state and federal administrations. We will also mention some aspects of the voting process that you can get involved in directly to better understand the voting process and, of course, to help other voters. We're going to start our evening off by talking about something that I know you all have heard about, and that is the White House executive order. So, bringing us a discussion of that issue is someone from the National Common Cause. So, we have some big league people with us this evening, and that's Andrew Walchuk. Andrew, can you tell us about this new White House executive order on mail ballots?
Yes, and thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to join y'all. I work really closely with our state director, Amy Keith, who I know many of you know and work with, and we are just happy to support in any way that we can. We are looking at the new executive order, and we are very happy that we have challenged it in court alongside the NAACP and Black Voters Matter. We have challenged it in the District Court of DC, and I'll get a little bit more to that, but at the outset, I just want to kind of level set with, what an executive order is. I think a lot of people often come in and, President Trump wants you to think it's the law and that he's stating the law with the stroke of his pen, but that's not how the government works. That's not how the Constitution set up our system of government. And so I think it's useful to look back. He tried to do this in March of 2025. So a year ago, he tried to do documentary proof of citizenship through the National Voter Registration Form. And he tried to use federal authorities to be able to do that. But he is not able to just do everything from the White House. He needs to run things through other federal agencies that actually have the power that Congress has given them to regulate some of these areas. And so he was trying to do it through some of those, but he just didn't have the authority to do that. And that is what courts found. So a number of people challenged that first executive order, and almost all of it was blocked within a month of him signing that executive order. So that attempt to institute DPOC through the federal form was blocked. Attempts to cut funding to states that weren't going along with his plan were blocked. Attempts to go after states that were accepting mail ballots after Election Day, as long as they were postmarked by Election Day, that was blocked. So we've seen this effort before, and we know that courts, even in the world we're living in with the judiciary we have, courts have stopped him and pushed back against these efforts because he just does not have the constitutional authority to do that with an executive order. So it's always really important to go into thinking about any executive order with the recognition that his power is much more limited than he would like you to think that it is. So this executive order really came about as he was having failure after failure to try to pass the SAVE Act and the various versions of the SAVE Act in Congress. So the White House was looking for what they could do, again, in their strong effort to try to nationalize elections in a way that the Constitution doesn't allow for. And the scheme they came up with this time has a couple different components. You've probably heard that this is a mail voting EO, and that really is the big headline out of this, is that they're trying to weaponize the Postal Service to try to block Americans' ability to vote. But it is a little bit more than that. And I think I want to make sure that we cover that piece too. So I think the thing to really keep in mind is it creates a number of federal databases, which is itself its own concern. We know that the federal government has, through DOGE and other mechanisms, already broken through a lot of barriers in terms of Americans' privacy rights. So it's already concerning that they're trying to compile all this data at the national level. but it envisions a couple of different lists. And that first list actually doesn't have anything to do with mail voting. It envisions DHS creating a list by state of who is eligible to vote in that state. So everyone over 18 who's a US citizen and is a resident in that state. We don't know where they're getting that residence information. We already know that their databases, like the SAVE database at DHS, are rife with errors, and many states are still, nonetheless, including Florida, many jurisdictions are using that SAVE database and discovering that it's filled with errors and that many citizens are being tagged as non-citizens. But this adds another level with residents, and they're going to be sending these state citizenship lists out to each state. And it doesn't exactly tell states they have to use that. What it does is it threatens by saying DOJ is going to go after any state official or any local official who gives a ballot, any ballot, not just a mail ballot, who gives a ballot to an ineligible voter. And it doesn't say it outright, but how are they going to define ineligible voter? Very likely based on these state citizenship lists. So this is not only a mail ballot EO, this is an attempt to further the voter purge efforts that they've been trying to pursue through things like the SAVE Act and through a lot of their requests for data, voter data from the states. So that is an important first component of this EO. The other component is about the mail piece. So states are supposed to send under this, the US Postal Service is supposed to create a rule, and that rule will require states to send them a list of the individuals that the states are planning to send a ballot to. And that will happen about 60 days before the election, which is already a problem because we know that the mail ballot deadlines, even though they've been shortened, are still far beyond 60 days before the election. So how is this going to be regularly updated? How are we going to ensure that USPS has the right information on who states are planning to send a ballot to, even in that flurry of activity before the election? We don't know how they're planning on operationalizing that. Can see a lot of problems coming up with that. And then from that list that states send, the US Postal Service is going to develop its own list, its own third list of mail and absentee voters. And the key part of this is that as part of their rule, they will not transmit the mail ballot of anyone who is not on that list. And so this is something that is just completely unprecedented to have the federal government declare that it is not going to send the mail of Americans and is going to target mail of particular Americans, especially when it comes to something like their core right to vote. It's completely unheard of. It's completely unconstitutional. And it also violates the independence of the Postal Service, which Congress set up to be independent from the White House, to be independent from political pressures. There's all sorts of sort of legal standards and norms that this policy would violate. And it's a huge cause for concern. Another piece that's very concerning about this is that there's actually no requirement under this executive order. USPS creates this list. They say, we're not going to mail the ballots of people who are not on our list. And they don't even have to tell you that they didn't mail your ballot. So you could drop your ballot at one of the blue postal boxes, think that it went to the elections office, and there's nothing that USPS has to do to tell you, oh, we didn't mail it, we didn't deliver it. And so it's incredibly concerning. We see this as a real threat for major disenfranchisement of voters across the country, especially because we know that the databases that they've created to date are incredibly flawed and filled with errors with regards to people's citizenship information. And also on top of this, that threat of prosecution for state and local officials is just an axe hanging over their head. It's another piece of stress for people who are trying to run our elections effectively. And it's going to create more of a threat that sort of when there's a borderline decision, any sort of question about something, that they're going to lean towards the option that is going to disenfranchise an eligible voter. So we and several other groups have sued to try to block this EO. Things are moving very quickly, so we have requested a preliminary injunction against this executive order, and briefing on that will be done in the first week or so of May, and a hearing should be relatively soon after that. We don't know. This is a new judge who has not dealt with many of these issues before. We don't know how the judge is going to rule on it. So, despite the fact that much of this is clearly illegal, violates constitutional principles, violates timelines that are set under the National Voter Registration Act, there's all sorts of flaws with this executive order. Um, we don't know for sure and can't say for sure what is going to come of it. It is something where, we are going to have to keep all of you informed, and you all through your networks hopefully can continue to push out accurate information, because it is understandably in an environment where there's so many questions, there's also a lot of questions about what's actually in the order, because it's not the clearest, because they don't have the best lawyers. Um, it really is an environment rife for misinformation and for voters being confused about what is going on. So a lot of these core things that we are reiterating, and especially in places like Florida, where there have been efforts to purge voters based on citizenship information, reiterating for folks to check their registration, make sure that their registration is up to date, has the correct information, that nothing has gone wrong with it. That's going to be really key. And, folks, if you're able to vote early and avoid the postal system, start thinking about how you might be able to do that. We are not at a point where we're saying, oh, you shouldn't vote by mail. And I know we're going to hear more about voting by mail. There's a lot of question marks out there, but it is, I think, the starting point of what we can tell folks today is just make sure your registration information is correct, and have a plan of how to vote. And we will continue to provide information on how that plan may need to change if this executive order does actually move forward. But we have strong belief and strong hope that the courts will recognize the unconstitutional nature of it and the illegality of this EO and stop it in its tracks, just like they did with the last executive order on voting.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That's quite frightening. I hate that we would have to depend on the U.S. Postal Service to do much of anything for us, because they're really having difficulty just getting the mail in our mailbox. So we will stay vigilant. And as you mentioned, we are part of the NAACP is part of that litigation. So I know that we'll be receiving information from a lot of sources on this as the litigation moves forward. So we are going to keep moving, and we're going to talk about how to request the vote by mail ballot today in the state of Florida. And hopefully we can keep this information intact as we monitor and understand what is happening with this executive order. So bringing us that information this evening is my friend Jonathan Weber, who is the policy director for Southern Poverty Law Center. Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Pamela, and thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Jonathan Weber. I'm the Florida Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm based up here in Tallahassee, but I did grow up in Broward, so of course I'm always rooting for my friends down in South Florida. I went to South Plantation High School, and my wife went there, and Broward will always be home, but I do live up here now, of course, to deal with the legislature, which is what I have to do. So thank you so much. So I'm going to walk through something that sounds a little procedural, but actually has like some really big consequences for whether people are able to vote and how they're able to vote in Florida. So let's start with just the basics real quick. In Florida, vote by mail is something you have to actively request. It doesn't just show up automatically like in some other states. Here we have to ask for it. And importantly, very importantly, that request, when you ask for that ballot, it does not last forever. And in recent law changes in the past 5 years or so, that timeline has been shortened. So it's only your request is only good through the end of the calendar year of the next regularly scheduled general election. So, for example, 2026, we have a general election in November. All of those ballots, those request forms, I should say, will expire at the end of this year, and everybody's gonna have to go through the same process again to request those vote by mail ballots once the calendar strikes over to 2027. So that's why you'll see lots of voting rights advocates, like nonpartisan C3 voting rights advocates, say it all the time, like make sure that your vote by mail form is re-requested because it's something we have to remind ourselves to do now every 2 years. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they just assume based on the past that once you sign up, you're set, and that's just no longer the case. So if you want to vote by mail, the first step is to contact your county supervisors, a supervisor of elections, or you can go to this website, and I'm going to post it in the chat. It's a good thing to remember and to keep it bookmarked. And just remember to go there and check. You can also check your status there. It's no problem. It takes just 30 seconds to check your own status to make sure that nothing's happened to your own registration. And if you've moved lately or anything like that, it's a really always a good time to check your voter registration status. You can also, of course, always call your local supervisor of elections office by phone. You can send them an email. You can write a letter. You can show up at the office. Whatever you need to do, they will help you figure out if you're registered to vote and how they can get you signed up for vote by mail. But the timing does matter. It matters a lot more than people might realize. Elections happen in August and November, the primary and then the general. And sometimes people their election brain doesn't kick on until maybe just about a week before the election. It's like, oh my gosh, that's right, there's an election coming up. And by the time they get their act together, it's just a couple days out. Well, that's too late to ask for a vote by mail ballot if it's just the day or two before. So you have to do it with plenty of time. And again, you could do it right now if you wanted to. The deadline to request a ballot to be mailed to you is 5 p.m. on the 12th day before Election Day. After that, it generally can't be mailed to you. So the system really depends on voters making that request early and doing the little bit of work it takes to get that request in, and also to give yourself plenty of time. Once you receive your ballot, the timing still matters. And there's been some changes to some of these rules over the past few years, so I'm going to go through them again, just so everyone knows. In Florida, your vote by mail ballot has to be received by your supervisor of elections by 7 o'clock p.m. on Election Day. It must be received by your supervisor by 7 o'clock p.m. on Election Day, not the day after. You can't put it in the mail like the U.S. mail on Election Day. It has to be received by Election Day at 7 p.m. Even if the postmark says Election Day, doesn't matter. It has to show up in their hands by 7 o'clock p.m. on Election Day. So when you make that request, you also have to provide identifying information. That's typically your Florida driver's license number or your state ID number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And that information has to be verified against what's in your voter registration record for that request to go smoothly. And in most cases, it probably will. There probably won't be an issue if you're already a registered voter. Like I am up here, it's really, I just fill out the form, it's no problem. But if everything is fine, your ballot's mailed to you and that's it. You fill it out, you sign the envelope and return it. That's it. But even after you return it, there is another verification step. Election officials will compare the signature on your ballot envelope to the signature in the voter file. If there's an issue, voters do have an opportunity to fix it by submitting a cure affidavit, but that also comes with a deadline. Usually it's 2 days after the general election, 5 p.m., 2 days after. But there is one other kind of new introduction, new complication that's showed up in the past couple of years. And my colleague Brad is on the phone. If I misstate any of this, Brad, like please chime in on this one because it's a little complicated. It has to do with your driver's license number, like the number we all have. It starts with the first letter of your last name, like mine starts with W. And the change doesn't stay contained within the DMV because it interacts directly with the voting system. Because when your driver's license number changes, your voter registration record is not automatically updated unless you take that step yourself or opt in during the DMV process. A lot of people don't realize that. They renew their license, they get the new number, and they just move on, not even thinking about how it might impact something as fundamental and critical as voting. It might be a year out from the election. So now you have possibly two different sets of information in two different systems. Your current driver's license has one number. Your voter file may or may not still have the old one. And that mismatch matters exactly the moment when you try to request your vote by mail ballot. And kind of like here's how it might play out, right? So you renew your license, get a new number. Elections coming up, you go online, request your vote by mail ballot. You enter your driver's license number, the one on your valid and current ID. The system checks that information against your voter registration record. If it can't be verified by what's on file, your request may be delayed, flagged for follow-up, or rejected until it's resolved. And from a voter's perspective, it's not really obvious why. I mean, people are busy. We're all busy lives. And, I'm a voting rights policy professional, and I still, have a tough time keeping my head wrapped around this stuff as we get closer to election day. Um, so even election officials are warning about this problem, thanks to some advocates for pointing that out. So this is not like a hypothetical problem. Like, this is a problem. What makes it especially frustrating is how routine the triggering event is. Renewing a driver's license is something millions of people do without giving it a second thought. There is no reason to assume that could create a problem months later when you try to vote. So for vote by mail voters, the verification step is really a good, important point of friction. And when you layer on top of the other vote by mail changes, like the need to renew your requests after each general election cycle and the hard deadline of less than 2 weeks out before election day to request it, you start to see how many different hurdles line up that just make it harder for people to vote. Not because they are ineligible and not because they did anything wrong on their own, but because the system requires multiple steps, multiple gotcha moments where it makes things harder to vote, which is something that the advocacy community in Tallahassee, we are consistently trying to argue in the legislature. Um, so there are some practical steps that people can take. Again, if you've renewed your license lately, check the voter registration and make sure your information is up to date. And if you plan to vote by mail, request your ballot as early as possible. Do it tonight if you can. Do not wait until you're close to that deadline. We want to make sure there's plenty of time to settle any problems should they arise. But really, the responsibility shouldn't fall entirely on voters to catch and fix these kinds of administrative disconnects. If the state is going to change how it assigns identity numbers, it should also make sure those changes don't quietly interfere with the voting process. It's a shame that it worked out that way. But right now, for some Floridians, the process is more fragile than it needs to be, and I recommend you go to that website and check your status right now just to make sure. Um, and that's vote by mail.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Like I said, everything is far more complicated because that's how they want it to be. But let's keep moving and talk about some more complications. Haven't really occurred yet, but it's something that we can anticipate. As Senator Osgood mentioned, Florida passed its own version of the SAVE Act. Uh, that is something that will require documentary proof of citizenship. But let's talk about what it is, how it is, and when it is. So we have discussing that with us this evening, House Bill 991, Brad Ashwell, who is the state director for All Voting is Local. Tell us how it works, Brad.
Thanks, Pamela. And first I want to thank the Broward County NAACP for hosting this panel. Always want to thank Pamela Birch for the good work she does on every level of the process for voters of Florida, for groups like the NAACP and a number of other groups. And for anybody watching this, for taking the time to listen. So as Pamela said, I'm going to talk a little about HB 991. That's Florida's version of the SAVE Act. It's a copycat bill is what we're calling that. And it's not the only state considering legislation like this. It's a national trend. Every year now, as Pamela laid out very well, the Florida legislature passes a bill that further restricts voting access. As with other unnecessary bills, this bill is completely unnecessary from the start. Aside from the one issue that Jonathan mentioned about driver's licenses, it really didn't address any substantive issues. It's truly another attempt to make voting harder for certain people, so one party can hold on to power, avoiding accountability for harmful policies and their persistent failure to address real issues affecting Floridians' lives. This bill is really all about keeping people from voting, kicking voters off the rolls, so they can keep power, and that's it in a nutshell. It's important to note, before I get into details of the bill, I'm just talking about some sort of high level notes. It's important to note there are like some really important distinctions between the Federal SAVE Act and HB 991. I'll go over those in a bit. But the most important pieces of this bill, Pamela quickly alluded to, it requires voters to prove their U.S. citizenship to register and vote using documents like passports, birth certificates, or Real ID compliant licenses. It uses state databases like the Florida DHSMV to verify citizenship status. So a lot of this proof of citizenship happens actually on the back end between databases rather than voters having to take additional IDs to the polls. But they'll basically use the databases behind the scenes to flag voters who will have to provide that additional information, and they'll be notified by their supervisors of elections. It also tightens voter ID rules by limiting acceptable IDs at the polls and for curing both vote by mail and provisional ballots that have problems. It also requires that your driver's license will now have your legal citizenship status on it, basically tantamount to a scarlet letter that could lead to a lot of racial profiling for certain people. I think the win is probably the most important thing to kind of bring everybody's blood pressure down a little on this, because this is all really bad and problematic. But one of the good things is that it won't, a lot of these changes, everything I just laid out, won't go into effect until January 1st, 2027. So I want to repeat that there are no changes to voter registration, voter ID, or vote by mail for the 2026 elections in this August and November. The bill does do quite a few other things. I'm not going to go into all of those. Like the statewide voter registration form will now have this sort of intimidating felony warning, which we don't love, we don't like. And then, there's a handful, maybe more than a handful of election administration changes that are kind of wonky that could impact people behind the scenes, but they're not really problematic. They're just changes, tweaks to how the process works. I think the main thing for people to know is that, and it's been asserted in a few different ways already on the call, it's just very important, this cycle, I'll say in 2020, we might be saying have a very different message in 2027 once this bill goes into effect. But for right now, the best thing for everybody to do is to make sure all your registration information is up to date. Tell your friends to do so as well. Check that your name is spelled right. There could be just a typo. Human error is a thing. We have poll workers, or sometimes people just make a mistake filling out a form. One of us might make a mistake. So, look at your voter registration information, make sure the name is right, it's spelled right. If you've had a name change, make sure that's reflected there. Update your signature, your address, your party affiliation. And, even though the very problematic parts of the bill won't go into effect until January, this is just a good thing to do. This is something we should all be doing on a fairly regular basis anyway to make sure our votes count. One thing that supervisors of elections have given us guidance on, I've talked to 3 of them who said that this will help them, is, so when you're filling out your form, you only have to give them your driver's license, your state ID, or your social security number. They're saying if you give them your Florida driver's license and your social security number, those 2 data points will help them, identify you and establish your citizenship, and it'll eliminate a lot of problems. So we're recommending that people filling out a form or updating their registration include both of those, their driver's license and their social security number. Another thing that people don't always do, because, voter registration records are public, some aspects are public, but we are strongly encouraging all of you and any of your friends or family to give the voter registration form your phone number, your email address, your physical address, all the ways that they can contact you if there is an issue, because that's a pretty common problem. They just aren't able to get a hold of people when there is an issue. And then, the other thing you could do now, or people could do now, we all could do now, is to start gathering any information that might be needed, which is probably a good thing to do anyway, given how many hurricanes we get slammed by in Florida. But, if you have a real ID already, that's probably something to highlight. You're probably going to be okay with a lot of the proof of citizenship stuff, and then a lot of the documentation to prove your citizenship is the same as what it requires to get a real ID, even though the real ID doesn't establish citizenship. If that makes sense. So if you look at your driver's license, there's a little gold star in the right corner. That means you've already got a real ID, and at some point you probably had to show a birth certificate and passport, and then you're probably going to be okay when the databases do their thing behind the scenes. If you don't have that, we strongly encourage you to get it. And you can Google Real ID Florida, and the DHSMV page will come up, give you instructions. Vote Riders is an excellent resource. You're going to hear from them in a little bit, and you can call or email them. I'm sure Taylor will tell you more about how to get a hold of them. And then if you don't have a birth certificate, it might be good to start finding a copy of that and ordering it. Passport, they can cost some money. So, that's up to you, but it would be good to have that if you've been, newly married and have had a name change or got a legal name change for another reason. Getting that documentation order would be good. If watching this, or somebody who's newly naturalized, it would be great for them to immediately update their information with the driver's license database. And Pamela, feel free to cut me off if I start going on too long. I can talk about this all day, but there've been a lot of questions that so I want to be clear. You won't have to produce this kind of information at the polls when going to vote, or when you're registering to vote, or if you're registering voters, you won't have to ask for it. This is going to get flagged by the state. They're going to tell the supervisor of elections, and if there's an issue, you'll hear from the supervisor of elections. It's very important that if you hear from the supervisor of elections, you respond very quickly. You'll have 30 days once they contact you, and mail delays could play into that time and cut it short. So as soon as you get that, if you get it, communicate with that office and establish, get them the documentation they need. So, I said earlier that I'd talk about the differences between the SAVE Act and the Federal SAVE Act and HB 991. So just to touch on that quickly, I think the main thing is that the SAVE Act applies to federal elections nationwide. It changes rules under the National Voter Registration Act, whereas HB 991 only applies within the Florida election system, state and federal elections in Florida. How citizenship is verified is different between the two. The SAVE Act does require documentary proof of citizenship on the front end, whereas HB 991 has this what's called a back-end process where the databases are talking to each other. And I'd say in some ways HB 991 goes further than the SAVE Act by changing acceptable voter ID forms, adding data sharing checks that could lead to list maintenance and removals and purges. And then the HB 991 doesn't have the tweaks to vote by mail, or tweaks, that almost sounds good. It doesn't have the changes to vote by mail, making it more restrictive that the SAVE Act has. So, just a couple quick notes and I'll shut up. There are several large lawsuits dealing with this law or dealing with HB 991, and our hopes are high. Hopefully some pieces of the bill will get overturned. An opportunity for anybody on the call is rulemaking. So, every time a big bill passes like this, there are aspects of it that have to be implemented by the Florida Department of State through rulemaking. And one thing we can do as advocates is, or even anybody watching this, anybody paying attention, can request a public hearing. And that's an opportunity for anyone to weigh in and say, this isn't right, or, to give them a better idea of how to actually implement it. So this is where we can get to the weeds and really mitigate, hopefully. And I have full faith that Pamela will make sure you're aware when this is happening. And I guess finally, I just point out there were some wins here. Thanks to strong grassroots efforts, a strong grassroots presence in the Capitol throughout the state, and some smart legislative advocacy by Pamela and the lobbying team, which is largely represented here. There are a few people missing. We were able to get that delay so that it didn't go into effect in July, and that it didn't, those pieces go into effect in January, on January 1st, 2027. There was another provision that got added at the last minute that would have required manual recounts for any like discrepancy when they're counting votes at the end, which would have potentially derailed elections across the state. For, I mean, again, there's human error in the system. So if one vote was off in their count, that would have triggered a hand recount. Picture the butterfly ballots in 2000. And it could have severely delayed certification of county elections and derailed elections statewide. So thankfully, we were all able to get that out of the bill. And then the DMV fix that Jonathan talked about, which is in a small fix. That's actually, that's something I think we can all toot our horns about a little. I mean, advocacy efforts made that an issue in the press. They had to respond to it, and they did. So good job to everybody. Finally, I'll just reiterate: this bill is about keeping people from voting. The best thing we can do is show them they can't silence our voices. We have to defy all their efforts and show up this election cycle. We're emphasizing every way we can, and we're trying to think of creative campaigns to just really emphasize getting out to vote early this cycle moving forward. A lot of the worst threats we're looking at could be mitigated or just avoided altogether. People show up early to the polls or vote by mail early. Early. Just remember early. But thank you for letting me speak to you tonight, and thanks for including me in this. It's great to be on a panel with so many bright minds. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brad. And I will say this was one of the hardest fought battles of this legislative session. And all of us here were struggling and spending time with our lawmakers trying to get some of the provisions of this bill changed. One of them, Brad, is the elimination of the use of student IDs for voting. And as we've said over and over, these bills are designed to keep people from voting. And so you have a situation here where we have college students who come from all over the country. Many of you know that at many of our state universities, they don't allow freshmen and sophomores to even bring their cars on campus. So, you come here from another state, you don't have your car. You come with the driver's license from the state where you've come from, but you get a student ID. You register to vote here in Florida. That's what many students do. But they can't do that anymore, even though those student IDs are most often issued by state colleges and state universities, just like any other state ID that can be used. So that's been eliminated, and it is one of the points that's being litigated, as Brad said. There is a litigation fight that has already ensued. Two of them were filed within moments of the bill being signed into law. One of the lawsuits is in the Southern District, the other is in the Northern District. We're assuming that at some point they'll be consolidated, but we will be asking for an early injunction, even though the provisions of the bill do not take effect until January of 2027. It's never too early to fight a voter suppression bill. And that is exactly what it is we intend to do. So we will be bringing you a lot more information about that. Please know that the NAACP received permission from its executive director and from national um, far before the bill even made it through the legislative session, because I was very intent that if it passed, we were going to be in court immediately, and we are. And thanks to Common Cause and so many of the other partners who are also litigating this bill. Let's move on and talk about some of this identification that we currently need today and we may need into the future. As Senator Osgood put in the chat, many of these documents cost money. Nothing is cheap. Even getting a passport. I think we did some research, and the cheapest passport will cost you like $197. And that's just not chump change, as they say, for many people. So Taylor Ashley with Vote Riders is going to clue us in on the types of identification we need, but more specifically, how to gain access to it. And Vote Riders is such an important organization to us because they actually help you get the documentation that you need. Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am so incredibly thankful to be here and on this panel tonight. So my name is Taylor Ashley. I'm the state director for Vote Riders, and we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that solely focuses on voter ID issues, education, and assistance. And when we talk about voter verification and identification changes in 2027, right now it's all about being prepared and having the right documents. Being able to access and afford those documents is something that we consistently see as a barrier that shows up in our communities. And while we know, like others have mentioned, that there has been lawsuits filed and there are still details needing to be worked out through the rulemaking process and through implementation, it's important to keep in mind that there are certain groups that are more likely to be impacted by these requirements than others. So, for example, we know that seniors who may have been born at home and never received a formal birth certificate, especially Black seniors born under and during Jim Crow, or folks that have older documents that may have errors or inconsistencies. Seniors who do not have an ID or a driver's license, and especially those who never received a real ID since they started being issued in 2017. New citizens are another group. These individuals should be getting a new ID and providing their naturalization or citizenship papers within 30 days of their change status. So if they haven't gotten a new ID since becoming a citizen, they should do so now. Puerto Rican voters are another group that we're paying close attention to. They are U.S. citizens, but in many cases, their birth certificates may need to be reissued if their document was issued before July of 2010 to meet current standards, and accessing those documents is not always simple. So students, we've mentioned about that group of individuals is more likely to move frequently. They may not have their documents readily available. And many have relied on student IDs, which in 2027 will no longer be accepted. So it's important that we start working to identify out-of-state students now to get them their Florida State ID or driver's license. And if a student needs another accepted ID to vote, if they're not able to establish residency in the state because for some reason they need to keep their out-of-state residency, and maybe for staying on their parents' health insurance or for another reason, we're finding another accepted form of ID so that they can vote. Another group to pay attention to will be individuals who have had their name changed. This includes married or divorced women, transgender individuals that may have inconsistencies in their names across documents. And in those cases, additional documentation such as marriage certificates, divorce decrees, or court orders may be required to establish the connection between their names. Now, this bill does not specify what documents that are going to be accepted for name change and exactly how voters should submit those documents. And while these groups may be more likely to be impacted, it is important to note that this can affect any eligible voter. A clerical error, a missing document, or a name mismatch could create a barrier to voting in 2027. So that's why preparation is critical. Ensuring voters can locate their documents now, confirm their names across records, and gather documentation that reflects legal name changes will be important steps moving forward. While these requirements are not set to be implemented until 2027, starting early matters. In some states, obtaining a birth certificate can take several months. If an individual we're working with needs a birth certificate from New York City, we can expect about 6 months until they receive that document. And even faster systems in states still take multiple weeks to get those documents in hand. The more preparation that happens now, the more likely it is that voters will be able to navigate these requirements when the times comes. And this is really where Vote Riders comes in. So we have a voter ID assistance program. This is where our direct service work lives and where we work one-on-one with people to help them get the documents they need for free. That can look like helping someone order a birth certificate, track down records across states, track down marriage and divorce decrees. We help schedule appointments, and we also provide transportation. And of course, we cover all of the costs for any of the documents. Really, whatever the barrier is, we work to remove it. So folks can visit votewriters.org/free help or call or text our helpline at 866-432-8683 to receive assistance. And I'll drop that information in the chat once I'm done. Another thing that we're also offering is a Florida ID assistance training. So if you are a community leader and you're interested in getting more into this work, we're training people how they can walk through actually navigating the process, and how you can support others in doing so. So if you're interested in this work, we are hosting a training on April 29th. It's about an hour long, and we're really getting into the details of the importance of this work and how to acquire documents. And we are also going to be sharing how that you can support your community while using Vote Riders resources. So at the end of the day, it's about making sure Florida communities are not left out because of paperwork, because no one should lose their voice or vote because they don't have the right documents. And the last thing that I'll just round this out and end this with, going to this year in 2026, just reminding people we've heard about how to request our vote by mail ballot. And if you show up in person, the photo ID with a signature, an unexpired, is what you would need to provide. So they are for 2026 accepting Florida driver's license, state ID cards, student IDs, US passports, military ID, retirement center IDs, neighborhood association ID, public assistance, a debit or credit card, veterans health ID, the Florida concealed weapons license, or an employee ID issued by the government. And thank y'all so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Taylor. So Taylor Ashley should be everybody's best friend because she can help track down the information, help you gain access to the information, the IDs that you need, and then pay for it. And we know that there are so many people in our community that just need that level of intensive help. So please take advantage of these resources. And one important thing that she said is that she'll train everybody else to know how to do what needs to be done using Vote Riders, tools, and assets. And so there is a training coming up. I believe you said on the 29th, Ashley. If you put your information in the chat, hopefully people will reach out, and I will make sure that our branch presidents are aware of that upcoming training, so that perhaps they have people within their membership that want to take advantage of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And there's still many reasons why people don't have IDs. Jonathan here relayed to us that some time ago he had a fire at his home and it destroyed all of his assets. And of course, we have hurricanes. And water and wind can be very destructive. So there are still people who, lost documentations and they've been so busy fighting their insurance companies to get their houses rebuilt that they have not had time to think about the birth control, the birth certificate, and their marriage and divorce certificates that were lost in the storm. So a lot of reasons here that people will need some help. So let's move on and talk about some things that we can all get involved in, learn a little bit more about what's happening in this process. And with all the misinformation and disinformation, we're going to have some ballots that are somewhat compromised. And we're going to perhaps need people in there watching what happens when these ballots are opened and how they're challenged in the canvas board process. So discussing that process with us this evening is Ricardo Negron Almovidar with All Voting is Local. And take it away, Ricardo.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you for the invitation to be sharing this space with such phenomenal people. Hi, everyone. My name is Ricardo Negron Almodovar. I'm the Senior Florida Campaign Manager with Obonis Local Action. Pamela, before I jump into the canvassing board stuff, I think it's very important that you also mention we have hurricanes. There are other emergencies, and that's something to also get into our minds as we're thinking, do we know where our documents are in case we need to go to a shelter, in case we need to move? So that's also something to message out as we're trying to get people ready for next year. So thank you so much for also mentioning that. And with that, I want to talk about ways that everybody can plug in to make sure that elections run smoothly, that elections are certified, the results are respected, and the will of the voters stand. One of those opportunities to plug in is the nonpartisan canvassing board monitoring program. For those here tonight that are not familiar with the canvassing board, this is the entity at the county level, sometimes at the municipal level as well, that are basically in charge of certifying the results of the election. At the county level, this board is mainly composed of the county judge, a county commissioner, and the county supervisor of elections. And at the municipal level, it'll depend on the municipal charter. And we know that just these first 3 months here in Florida, we've had many municipal elections, some of them with a difference of 5 votes. And we had actually canvassing board monitors there going over the recount process and all the other public proceedings. So the canvassing board, they're responsible for overseeing the testing of the election equipment before it's deployed to the polling sites. This is something that's commonly known as logic and accuracy testing and happens before any and all elections. And this is something that the public can join. The canvassing board also determines the validity of questionable ballots, ensuring that only legitimate votes are counted. They oversee recounts to ensure accuracy. And essentially, they provide transparency around the canvassing of the ballots. All voting in partnership with many of the organizations here present, including some of the NAACP branches like the branch in Miami-Dade and other counties, we have a program to train and deploy monitors to these public proceedings. So we can make sure that there is real-time awareness of any attempts to disrupt the elections during the pre and post-election procedures. So we monitor these public county canvassing board proceedings, including logic and accuracy, including certification, recounts, audits, vote by mail and provisional ballot approvals and cures. We try to have people there during all of the public meetings. Because by having monitors there, we can identify issues that are coming up and we can quickly alert influence officials and mobilize partners if needed so that we can reinforce a pro-voter narrative and we are able to respond. In 2024, we covered 32 counties in partnership with many of the organizations that are here talking tonight. And, that's almost half of the state. So please, what I encourage everybody is to be on the lookout because during the summer, we're going to start promoting trainings. We're going to start getting ready to recruit for the August elections because even though the elections is in August, these public proceedings that we want to have people in there in the room, they're going to start in July. So we're going to get folks ready for that. And of course, we'll do the same and even bigger for the November election. Another way that we can plug in is during when actual voting is happening and at polling sites is through the Nonpartisan Election Protection Poll Monitor Program. This happens as part of the Florida Election Protection Coalition. And this is, I'm pretty sure that many folks on the call have been deployed to be poll monitors. And so we train folks to be able to help answer voters' questions and also help us identify any issues that might be coming up at a voting site, whether that's long lines in a polling location, presence of law enforcement outside locations, machines going down, any issues that could really disrupt voting at that location. And that way we're able to reach out to the appropriate contact and really respond in an appropriate way. And the last thing I want to mention is that during election days, this effort, they do not happen in a silo, right? There's a lot of coordination happening right now, even though elections are still a few months away. And there is a Florida boiler room representatives from many of the organizations that operate across the state. This boiler room is where different area experts are meeting during election days to triage and address any of the issues that are happening, whether notified by our poll monitors through the 866 Our Vote hotline that assists voters, or it is mentioned through any of our partners. We operate virtually during specific early voting days and election day, but we are there to make sure that things are running smoothly and then we can really respond to any of the issues that come up. Something that I also want to add, and I invite everybody to join, is that we have regional spaces. We cover Central, South, North, West Florida, and that's where we really dig deep in strategies to make sure that in our counties, elections are working the way that they have to, and that our voters have the best possible access to the ballot box. And it include coming up with strategies to, as Brad mentioned, we really want to try to get folks to be able to vote before election day. So that's voting early, voting by mail, because that it opens up options for voters and they don't have to wait until the last day of voting, which election day, that's really your last opportunity to cast your ballot. But with that, thank you again for the invitation and happy to share the programs and resources that we have.
Thanks so much, Ricardo. And I want to thank you and Brad, especially for leaning in so well during the 2024 cycle. You really pressed me to make sure I would get some of our branches involved. And I think we had 4 of them that went through the Canvas board monitoring training and then participated during the election cycle. And I still hear from those folks, especially those in the panhandle, because they said we had no idea what that process involved. And they really, I'm hopeful that they will engage again this coming election cycle. So I thank you for that. And I do want to mention that the boiler room is a place to really get a better feel for what's happening because it records all of the activity on the ground. If there's a problem, if a voter approaches a poll monitor and say, "Hey, they won't let me leave my ballot," there's someone there that can help you that can call into the boiler room. There's legal counsel in there. Amy Keith from Common Cause does an excellent job with the boiler room process. So if that's something that some of you have not done, please let's give me a call and I'll get you plugged into that system so you can get a better understanding of this voting process. So one more thing I want to talk about here is something that I know you all are hearing about, and that is the mid-decade redistricting. And I want to say redistricting has a huge impact on voting power. Some people just turn off when they hear this redistricting because they're saying, oh, all they're doing is, changing boundaries. That doesn't affect me. Well, yes, it does. It affects the power that you have. It affected power so much that in 2022, through the governor's insistence, they deleted an entire minority majority district that was crafted along the slave um, border here between Georgia and Florida. So that voting power is gone. The black voters in that district were dispersed among 4 different largely white districts. And so their power has been diluted. So coming up soon, we guess, is something called mid-decade redistricting. We've never experienced that in the state of Florida. There is nothing that prohibits mid-decade redistricting, but it is usually done when you have census data, and we don't have any new census data. So I'm going to let Jonathan give us a little update on the chaos that's going around regarding mid-decade redistricting.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela. Once again, nice to see you all. And I will kind of go through redistricting just with a little bit of history, kind of so we kind of can just put into context how we got here and why we're here, which is still kind of hurts my brain to think about. But at its core, the system that we have set up is pretty simple. The United States Constitution sets up a representative democracy where each state gets seats in Congress based on population. Every 10 years, we conduct a census, divide that population across the 435 seats, and then the states draw districts so that each one has roughly the same number of people. The idea is straightforward. One person, one vote. My vote here in Tallahassee should carry the same weight as someone's down in Broward. It's not that complicated on its face. But the moment you have to draw lines on a map, you create an opportunity for manipulation. And that's where gerrymandering comes in, packing and cracking communities to shape outcomes. That's not new. It's been part of the process since the very beginning, really. And the stakes are, of course, extremely real. These lines decide who votes where, which shapes who wins elections, who holds power, and who actually gets heard. When the process is fair, voters choose their leaders. When it's manipulated, leaders start choosing their voters. Okay, so let's fast forward to Florida today, 2026. By several commonly used measures, Florida's already current maps, the ones we have right now, significantly favor Republicans. Independent analysis, including the Princeton gerrymandering project, have given our maps failing or near failing grades on partisan fairness. That's part of the baseline we're starting from right now. And despite that, we're now facing the possibility of mid-decade redistricting. Under normal circumstances, this would only happen after the census, usually in the first or second year after the census. But here we are in 2026, and that's what's different, the timing. Usually it's a court order that makes us go back and redraw the maps. We do not have that. There is no court order mandating that this happen. Does not exist. We also have to rely on census data. We do not have new census data. If we were to conduct redistricting, it'd be based on the census data from 2020 to 2021 when that process was completed. So why are we here? Well, last summer, President Donald Trump said the quiet part out loud, as he usually does. He pressured Republican-controlled legislatures across the country to redraw their congressional maps for his own political gain. In Texas, he even claimed, "We are entitled to 5 more seats." And if that doesn't just make your blood boil to think that any seat is entitled to any politician, that's just wild. Seats belong to the people, not to the politicians. There have been multiple conversations about how do we open up alternative ways to justify this process, including a new special census and they're throwing everything they can at the wall to see if it sticks. But the fact is, there is no real legal justification to do this right now in the middle of the decade. So when you reshape districts, it's not just about voting. It also changes how resources flow, how people organize. People, when they walk into the polling place, they should generally know who they're voting for. There shouldn't be brand new communities that have to figure out which district they're in every 2 years or every 4 years. It just does not make sense. That's bad government. The good news about Florida is that we actually have very clear constitutional standards to prevent the shenanigans that seem to be unfolding. You probably all remember back in 2010, Florida voters passed the 2 Fair Districts amendments, one for state legislative and one for congressional. These amendments are real, they are binding, they matter, and they say districts cannot be drawn to favor or disfavor a political party or incumbent. Like, full stop. You cannot draw maps to favor an incumbent or a political party. They also require protection for minority voting rights, and they require districts be reasonably compact and follow existing communities where possible. That's the law. That's in our Constitution. So any redistricting effort, mid-decade or otherwise, must meet those standards. And if it doesn't, it will be challenged. That's been a pattern over the last decade, and there's no reason to think that that would change. In terms of where changes could happen, we've heard different messages from the governor and other people around him of looking at places like Tampa Bay, Central Florida, and of course, South Florida. And the concern is straightforward. The changes in those areas could reduce the ability of Black and brown voters to elect candidates of their choice while also shifting the partisan balance in the surrounding districts. Every district is zero sum. If one moves this way, another one's got to move that way. So here, where are we right now? As of now, the Florida House of Representatives has set up a select committee on redistricting. It has 8 Republicans and 3 Democrats. It is chaired by Republican Representative Mike Redondo, who of Miami-Dade, who will be the likely House Speaker in 4 years, just over 4 years. The committee has met twice, back in the fall. They met in one of the smallest committee rooms in the entire Capitol complex, and those meetings ended early, both times, and both times without allowing public testimony, as is pretty traditional, especially when it comes to redistricting. Despite, of course, a packed room with overflow people flowing outside the doors and into the courtyard. The Senate has signaled that it's done absolutely nothing. Not one moment of work has been done on crafting a new map. There is no new committee. They're waiting for a map from the governor, is what they've said. A recent memo says the Senate president, from the Senate president, says that the map will be sent directly to the Rules Committee, which somebody on this call is going to have to handle. That's Senator Osgood, of course. So good luck, Senator, with that. But what that map looks like, nobody knows except for the governor and his team and whoever else he's possibly talked to. Certainly, I don't think anyone in the legislature has seen it yet. The House committee stopped work in the fall when negotiations fell apart. The governor set a special legislative session for April 20th, which is just this coming Monday. As you may have heard last night, everything got blown up and pushed back 8 days. And now session will start on April 28th, Tuesday. So sorry, Senator Osgood, if you had any plans or responsibilities, and sorry to all the advocates that were planning on trying to make their voice heard. They now have to reschedule their entire lives to meet this wild kind of demand from the governor. But will this happen is still, I think, up in the air. But advocates like us, we're not waiting to see. We are preparing as much as we can now, so that when the gavel strikes and we go back to the Capitol, we'll all be ready to go. So what does success look like? At the highest level, success is stopping any map that violates the fair district standards. That's the goal. That's it. If it's a partisan gerrymander, we have to stop it. That's it. But there are some other practical things we can do. First, public education. Redistricting is complicated. People don't only think about it once every 10 years, if they think about it at all. So it's up to us to make sure we're talking to members and talking to our constituencies and neighbors about what's happening. There's also plenty of evidence, including polling from groups like Common Cause. Thank you, Common Cause. And there's a new poll from Emerson that says there's bipartisan skepticism towards partisan redistricting. People get it. They understand, like innately, that when the powers that be have the chance to redraw maps, they're going to do it in their own favor, which is cheating. They get it. And again, in Florida, partisan redistricting is illegal. Second, it's our job to shape the media narrative here. That means press, events, and showing visible opposition, not just in Tallahassee, but across the state. I know it's very hard to mobilize around this, but it's something that we're working very hard on. There's a lot of great organizing groups, including Equal Ground and Florida Rising, and plenty of others who are bringing people to Tallahassee. And there are lots of advocacy ways to get involved if you can't come to town. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now that links to a link tree that a lot of different groups are using. There's a lot of different items in there that maybe people might be interested in. There's phone banking efforts. There's buses to Tallahassee. There's information, a lot of stuff there that people have put together. And the most important thing we can do is get the people of Florida engaged on this process. Doesn't matter what party they're from. Everyone needs to know that what's happening is illegal, wrong, and needs to be prevented if at all possible. And we might win. I think there's a real chance we might win here because I think a lot of lawmakers, Republicans as well, are kind of asking themselves, why are we doing this? What are we doing here? We're going to get dragged into court. They know that. It's going to happen. So that's where we're at. And again, that's it. Redistricting.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And just so everyone knows, we're just not waiting to see what's going to happen. We have been diligently meeting 2, 3 times a week, getting ready, getting our resources in place, educating the public as best we can, and we will be ready. It is interesting to note that the Florida Conference of NAACP has challenged every redistricting map that's been passed by the legislature since 1982. And guess what? This session won't be any different. We will be in there challenging something if it passes. But as Jonathan said, we've been working very diligently. We've been applying as much pressure as possible. And we think that there may be a chance that nothing happens. We're not naive in that regard. We're getting ready for it, but we work very hard and we will see what happens. I know that we've given a lot of information this evening. If there's something that you're confused about, we put a lot of information in the chat of websites that you can go to. President Ellison knows how to reach me, and I can reach all of the presenters here. If there's some particular information you need that you heard them say and you're a little bit confused about it or want more information. But before we leave, I want to say, because we have so many of our pastors on this call, I want to say churches will be extremely important this legislative session. Why? because people still trust churches. They may not want to go to church, but they still trust the church. So there are a lot of things that I think churches can do in terms of helping with some of the misinformation and disinformation. I know you all produce a lot of election materials. A lot of it is focused on candidates. Maybe this year there will be a focus on just providing basic information on how to cast your vote. We haven't done the souls to the polls in a while. Why? Because the legislature did everything they could to impact early voting, and we don't have as much Sunday voting as we used to have. But maybe we can get a bit innovative through the churches to see if there are ways that we can get our congregants to vote. Reaching out to the supervisor of elections. I know here in Broward, you have a very active and engaged supervisor of elections. I know that President Ellison has been able to reach out to him and say, okay, we need to have a forum. So bring your tables and all your information, and we're going to start registering people and giving them information. Our churches can get involved in doing that as well. Um, we don't have ballot harvesting anymore. It used to be that, churches could say, everybody just bring your ballot, bring your vote by mail ballot and put it in this basket and we'll get it turned in for you. No, you can't do it that way anymore, but you can surely invite the supervisor of elections to come and have church with you. Send his employees and they can take those ballots. So there are a lot of things and a lot of ways I think churches can be important. Going into nursing homes, I know you all do a lot of that. Can you imagine? There are people in nursing homes have been there in senior homes for a while. They don't drive. Many of them just yielded their driver's license. They didn't need to get them updated, but they are dedicated voters. They may not be able to do it quite that easy this time around because you have to have a valid driver's license. So those are some things I think our churches can help with. And I'll let my comrades chime in if they think that there are other ways that churches particularly can weigh in this confusing time that we're in.
I mean, to be honest, I'd love to hear if Senator Osgood has a response to that question. I mean, like as one of our great leads there.
And she's always out front. I'm sure she already has her program in place because she also works with Faith in Florida.
Okay. We were just letting you all finish the senator, and since you're there and you had your little bags packed ready to go to Tallahassee and all of that, and I see the text like it has been delayed, I was like, okay then, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually still have to go to Tallahassee. I have some meetings on Tuesday that I'm going to do those meetings. Thank you guys for sharing the information. I just want to go back to the redistricting real quickly. We have a clear example in Broward County. As you recall, I was elected to Senate District 33 in March 2022. A special legislative session happened. That district changed to Senate District 32. It went from 33 to 32. What was the difference? 10% of the Black voters in Pompano was drawn out of the district. That's what we call cracking, where you take out a small amount and put them in another district where their voting power is diluted. So sometimes it's not done in a drastic way. It's done incrementally. I am the social justice chair for the National Baptist Convention Women's Auxiliary. Was a part of a meeting today with the National Baptist president of the National Baptist Convention USA. So churches are unique in the way that they operate, in the way that they function. It's a structure, within the church. Many churches have social justice ministries, but I can tell you, like at my church with Pastor Marcus Davison and several other churches, Pastor Green, they are looking to be grossly involved in turning out the vote. The challenge for the church is a lot of times they are approached and people say that they're there to do information, but they're really pushing up a candidate that we may not be supporting, to just be direct. So Marcia and I, along with the Supervisor of Elections and Representative Darrell Campbell, will host a post-legislative session update on March 27th at 7 p.m. at the New Mount Olive Baptist Church. The Supervisor of Election will talk about voting. He will have staff there to engage individuals. Marcia will talk about the NAACP, and Darrell and I will talk about legislation with a lot of focus on the budget because we don't explain the budget to our community. And a lot of things happen through the budget process. You're looking for it in legislation, and it's being done through the budget process. I know that the National Baptist Convention is organizing and is planning a big training in Nashville in August to engage churches, to train churches on what to do in their social justice ministries as it relates to turning out the vote within the restriction of the different laws in the different communities. So there are churches that are actively engaged. There are others that we need to have boots on the ground and get engaged. And being clergy, it is something that I'm taking personal. A couple of weeks ago, I was at the Florida General Baptist Convention doing a legislative update, engaging them. I'm looking for support in sponsoring a Black Church Day at the Capitol. Yeah, I think the Capitol need a little bit of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I still believe wholeheartedly in that right there. So if you guys are able to help, I certainly will follow up with Miss Taylor and many of you. Jonathan, I see you, I interact with you all the time. But we have to galvanize and build coalitions and even build the bench of the coalitions in Tallahassee. Because in Tallahassee, they're used to seeing the faces on this Zoom. But we have to build our coalitions that we start bringing other groups of people that people are not used to seeing in Tallahassee. So thank you, Pamela, for the work that you do with the NAACP. And my shameless plug, if you're not a member of the NAACP, please join the NAACP. The NAACP needs resources to continue to file all these lawsuits and fight for us. We cannot negate that membership with the NAACP. Miss buying a pair of shoes, miss getting your hair done. It is vitally important, not only to your future, but to the future of your children and your grandchildren. So we want to make sure that you are a member. And we petty. So I'm going to ask the president. I've already screenshotted the names. That's the people, the participants. I've gone on the YouTube page. So I'm going to ask the president of these people's members. So if you get a text or a call from me, don't ignore it because I'm going to keep calling.
Thank you. I do want to, we're going to see if people have a couple of quick questions quickly. But I wanted to ask to whomever. So we keep saying driver's license, you get a new number, driver's license, update your voting record there. But what about state IDs? Are they getting new identification numbers as well? And should we now update our voting record to also include our newly issued a state ID card? Is that a thing?
I'll jump in and answer this one. I state IDs and driver's license, when we're talking about voting, the numbers can be used kind of in interchangeable language. Literally, the only difference is one allows you to drive and one doesn't. But for the purpose of voting, yes, would need to update an ID number, and when you get that ID, provide the same documents as you would a driver's license.
So they're changing numbers on both the state ID and the driver's license.
Yes.
If I could add to that, I mean, the good thing in the bill is that it addresses that. That information will be automatic. I mean, the problem was you had this like database, like this lack of communication, and voters were being unfairly penalized by that. So, the information from the DMV wasn't making it to the Department of State and the supervisors of elections. One of the few, maybe the only good thing in the bill is that it now they'll be required to forward that information. So that shouldn't be a problem moving forward. But I'd be interested to hear what Supervisor Scott or their supervisors think. My understanding is everybody's pretty good with the language in the bill regarding that.
Okay. We also have the president of Indian River. I'm not going to make him go on screen, but I do want to hear because they have more. We're actually in a better space with our supervisor of election than most people are, fortunately for us, but that part. So I wanted to have President Brown just say a couple of words and speak to what how this is working for information is working for him. President Brown. I just threw that on, so he may be struggling a little bit. And while we're doing it, we have representatives from Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We have Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. We have Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We have the links. We have my sisters from my OES chapter of Golden Victor, who are supporting and getting information. They're sending their folk so that they can then carry the information back. And this video, as I said, will be posted. We've already sent it out to other folks who were not able to meet it because there's a lot of stuff that's going on. But this won't be the end all be all, but they can follow up. And we have the information for everyone who will be working on those social action chairs as well. So we want to make sure that we have that. Do we have any questions? We'll take a few, have time to take a few before, because we said 8:30. But
Madam President, if you would
yes,
allow me to, I also want to recognize Valerie Brandt Wilson, who is the Secretary for the National Baptist Convention Social Justice Commission and President of One Voice Florida.
very nice, very nice. I joined the call so that I get a lot of great information from there. President Brown, are you available to speak? Okay. And so we also have a member of the Fort Lauderdale Black Policemen's Association that's on as well. Shriners that are on as well. So I don't see anyone's hands up. So I want to make sure that we get all of our questions answered. But I think we have a lot of people that are Taylor that are interested in the training as well. We'll make sure that that information is getting. Somebody said totally fine. It's confusing. Well, that's why we're going to post the video, and we have all the contact information. So we understand it is a lot of information, but no worries. We are going to make sure that we make it plain, as we say over at Mount Olive, so that everyone is able to get the information. This is not something that we're going to be talking about once. We'll be talking about it many times and providing resources. Both the Senator and Pamela are always just a text away, so we can get any of the information that we need. So I would think that we would encourage people being with this information with the United States Postal Service. It seems to me that we ought to be as an organization, I'll just speak for the NAACP, encouraging people. We say go right away. I mean, we don't mean to go to the post office and drop off your vote by mail ballot, but go right away to the supervisor of elections office or the early voting sites to drop those, because with all the changes and it's already bad because in Broward, all of basically our mail goes to Miami and then comes back. That has been a process in itself. And so we've had folk who, based on information we received from the supervisor of elections, folk have gone in, they have mailed at one of the sites, the drop boxes, or not the drop box, but the PO boxes, gone by the post office, dropped it in the blue box, and 2 weeks later, the ballots have not been received, which means those folk have not been able to vote. The vote didn't count. So, and there's no coming back from that. We will check with the supervisor of elections office to determine if he is going to allow the continuing information there was an agreement that if you are going to they're going to gather our ballots separately at the supervisor of elections or at the Miami-Dade site where our mail is collected. They would then make an arrangement for several days, every day of early voting in particular, and all the way up to election day, to go down and physically pick up the ballots because they do get lost in the mail. I would hope that, and I will see that if Joe Scott is going to plan to continue that, or if he or his GC have told him that that is no longer allowed. But it is a good practice, even as for on election day. So the law was, it had to be in the hands of a member of the supervisor of elections. So they would send members of the supervisor of elections down to the site where the distribution center where our ballots were held in the mail and bring those up. So they may be down there at 7, but they're the ones that had the ballots. So I'm not. It'll be interesting to see if the current administration has made that a thing where he couldn't do that at all. They have a police escort. They go around to the other sites who have collected those on election day. They just have to tell them the elections that we have ballots here, and they send people out. So let's hope that that will be continued plan. We'll find out on Thursday, 1 week from tonight. Joe Scott will be at our meeting, New Mount Hermon AME, Fort Lauderdale, at 7 p.m. so that we can hear directly from him. There is much confusion about the driver's license slash state ID. When can you update online? Because there are several folk who are on this call who've had experiences that didn't. They went in to register. They went in to check their status. They used their new number because they didn't memorize their old one, and then that's a whole ordeal. So we're getting mixed messages from the Broward SOE office as to whether you can go online and update. Do you have to re-register? And so we're getting different stories from different staff. And so, that's kind of where we are as far as that goes. But it's not we got to get, um, we got to get, we got to get some information and get some processes in place. Um, um, Mr. Brown says he doesn't know it's wrong. He's not able to get on, so I don't know what's going on with that. Judge, do you want to share anything? Because I know you all had an experience over at your chapter. Things didn't go well.
Well, I'm hoping, Madam President, and thank you very much, and thank you to the panel. Very informative. I was taking notes. I wasn't sleeping. I have a book of notes that I took, and I'm certainly going to check in with the vote writers myself to make sure that I get their training down pat also by using their tools. But I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and the Broward chapter, our social action chair, mentioned about the driver's license. And during our meeting itself, we many of them were able to go on, only to find out while they were online sitting in chapter meeting that there was no record, either no record of them being a registered voter because their driver's license number had changed. And so there was a lot of confusion. So I'm hoping that next week, on the 23rd, that the supervisor himself can come, because I had to go because I'm 119 protected. I can't just go online and do things, and I had difficulty, and so they had me to create I had to go and register like I was a new voter. So I told him I don't want to hear from Mr. Byrd in Tallahassee that there are 2 records of me, but I'd be a great test case for the NAACP in a courtroom, trust me. So this has created so much confusion. I don't even see the need why they had to change the license, because I had a license. It was a real ID with my old number. So there's really no need. Somebody's making money somewhere, and it's causing confusion. And if you're not tenacious enough, people are going to give up and they're going to just walk away and not do it. I think Mr. Brown is on, so I'll yield. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Judge. President Brown?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, Pamela, excellent panel, excellent presentation. Once again, Marsha, home run. But I concur with Taylor Ashley. Everybody needs to become her best friend because she has some important information. And not only that, she has the funds and the ability to help orchestrate some bad areas that our people are being put in. We in Indian River County are somewhat fortunate because Leslie Swan, she bends over backwards to work with our organization. So we're blessed, but we still must continue to inform our people, be vigilant, because the enemy is awake every night, all night. And so collectively, I think we can win this battle. And once again, Marsha, thank you for an excellent panel. And Pamela, keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right. All hearts and minds are clear from the panelists. With that. All right. With that being said, Minister Edwards, if you will, close us out.
All right, Madam President and all assembled, let us go to the throne of grace. Gracious Lord, we are grateful for what you have allowed us to hear. We are grateful for the increase in our understanding. We pray now that you would be with us, grant us clarity, and help us to use these vital tools as we go forth with this work of justice. Bless all of these, your people, as they depart from this call, but never from your presence. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful job. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.